I think if the 49ers are going to beat this team, they're going to have to show that they can beat man coverage. I think Ricky Pearsall is going to have a significant role, believe it or not, even though he's never played it for the Niners before. I think he's going to have a role, especially in the red zone. I think Brock Purdy's going to have to run when the defense turns their back on Purdy. I think 49ers are going to have to be +2 in turnovers. And to me, the real challenge for the Niners offensively, because the Chiefs defense is the best unit on the field. The one thing that was the prevailing thought when I watched the All-22 of Kansas City's defense, and I went back and looked at 3 different games of Kansas City's defense on the NFL Plus on the All-22, what really jumps out is just that they are absolutely spectacular at disrupting rhythm of their opponent. And they do it in every way imaginable, right? So they're getting pressure up front with Chris Jones, George Karlaftis. Those are the 2 guys that I think get the most pressure up front. But then they've got a couple linebackers in Nick Bolton and Leo Chenal, who are really good on that second level. And then what I see as kind of the one thing that Kansas City looks different than other teams is that their DBs, whether it be McDuffie, who's on one corner, they have Jalen Watson on the other corner. They've got Justin Reed at strong safety, and a guy named Chamari Connor is their nickel, who's now with Snead moving on. They move Trent outside, and Connor's the new nickel. The one thing that jumps out is these guys clutch and they grab and they hold, and they do it on every single snap. And then Spags is going to dial up an array of blitzes, and he loves to come off the edges. He loves to come out of the slot. They play a lot of man behind it, and they're just so good at disrupting a quarterback's rhythm by clutching and grabbing these receivers, taking away your quick game, taking away your short stuff, disrupting your rhythm. And then Spags also, Chase, what I saw is that he strategically chooses 3 or 4 downs throughout the course of the game where he's just going to take that down away from you and you're going to have to move on to the next down. He's going to come at you with some kind of overload to one side or a slot pressure, and he's just really good at timing those up. And they're just a very difficult defense to get explosives against because of all these things. What do you see the Niners' game plan other than Purdy running, getting the ball to Pearsall a little bit more in the red zone? What do you think the overall game plan is going to be? Lynch on KMBR this morning made it sound like Mason's going to try to gut it out as their primary runner, which is good because they need him.
I think you made some phenomenal points there. And with the Chiefs being physical at the line of scrimmage, playing press man in the secondary, when they will try to grab you and try to discard you on your route, you think about what the Niners do well, have done well, and try to accomplish on the offensive side of the football. I know that their wide receiver separation is down this year. Their yards after the catch are down, but Kyle Shanahan tries to draw up plays in order for his playmakers to catch the ball, pick up yak, and part of his offense is getting the ball in the hands of his playmakers so that they can pick up yards after the catch. But if their routes are getting disrupted, and if the Chiefs are really physical, it throws the timing off of the play and the rhythm off of the play in this drop back pass game. And in speaking of some of the specifics that you did with the Chiefs playing man, Kyle Shanahan talked about this on Thursday, how the Chiefs going into the Super Bowl played man defense about 20% of the time, but in the Super Bowl, that went up to 35%, and you could tell it caught the Niners off guard. Deebo Samuel wasn't able to get off the line of scrimmage. I thought Brandon Ayuk was thrown off a little bit, and again, the rhythm and the timing of this pass game tied to the drop back of Brock Purdy and the blitzes really threw the Niners in a spiral at moments in that game. And this year, the Chiefs are blitzing at the second highest rate in the NFL. They're applying pressure on 34.2% of the opposing quarterback's dropbacks. Purdy against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl was pressured on 46.3% of his dropbacks. And if you think about 2 of the top defensive minds in the NFL, Steve Spagnuolo, Brian Flores, what did the Vikings do back in that week 2 game against San Francisco? Brock Purdy was blitzed more than 50% of the time, and his splits when going up against man and zone are a lot different. And Purdy has struggled against man. And some of that is due to lack of yak and lack of wide receiver target separation. But his completion percentage, Larry, against man is 41.1%. That's 33rd in the NFL.
Wow.
His passer rating against, his passer rating, and I can say it again for you. So completion percentage against man, 41.1%, 33rd in the NFL. His passer rating against man is 32, 32nd in the NFL. How about this, though? His completion percentage against zone is 73.7%, 6th in the NFL. His passer rating against zone, 130.7, number 1 in the NFL. And what did Spags say on Thursday, in addition to saying, I can't find a weakness in his game? This Brock Purdy kid, he is really legit. He said he does a great job, and the wide receivers do a great job of finding pockets in the zone. And I think that's where you see Brock Purdy throw with such timing, accuracy, precision, layering the ball in there, because he knows he can layer footballs in if the defense is playing zone. When they're playing man, the timing gets disrupted. This is a Niners receiving core that struggled to create separation. And Brock Purdy doesn't trust what he sees as much, and he tends to hold on to football a little bit long because either people aren't open or he gets confused a little bit. So going back to your question, that's a huge key in this game as far as the Niners game plan goes. So when John Lynch says on Friday morning on KNBR that Ricky Pearsall has a great opportunity to play in this game, what does Ricky Pearsall do really well? At least at the college level, what we saw him do: quick feet, initial separation, short area quickness. He can create separation downfield a little bit because he'll use his body and torque his body so good on his routes to fake DBs out. But he's such a clean route runner, and he's such a decisive route runner where he can open up those pockets for Brock Purdy to deliver some of those footballs, especially in the red zone. I'm not sure if Ricky Pearsall is in good enough shape to play a bunch of snaps in this game if Jawan Jennings can't play, but in certain situations, he could be an X factor in this game, and so too could Jordan Mason if he's able to play, because this Chiefs defense is one of the top defensive units in the NFL in stopping the run.
How about let's flip the card and talk about the Niners defensively. One of the supers here I've got is from David. He says, David E says, Larry, how did Sorensen respond when you asked him about replacing Campbell? Well, you know what? I'm going to let you see it right here. Here's the question and here's the answer. And we'll talk about this because I think he's kind of off on this one, but let's hear Sorensen. This is from yesterday's presser, and you'll hear my. Here we go.
42 missed tackles in the last 3 weeks, and Campbell's missed, I think, 8 or 9 of them. Obviously you're going with him. Why is he a better option than Winters or Graham?
We like both of them. I mean, they've both been getting snaps. Talking about D and Devondre, he's got so much experience. He brings a calmness. He understands the scheme, and he's been doing a really good job. And we've also been rotating D in there as well. So just like both of them.
So that was the answer. The only thing is that the numbers really say that that's not the case. That he said Devondre's doing a really good job, and once again, I mean, he knows what he's talking about better than I do, right? Supposedly, but he allows or I should say, Campbell is allowing a 115.6 passer rating when targeted. That's 18th worst among all linebackers in the league. He's missed 8 tackles. He's got a 19% missed tackle rate, which is 4th worst in the NFL. PFF lists him as the 3rd worst tackle grade among all linebackers in the NFL, and he's giving up a reception percentage of 89.3%, which is 10th worst in the NFL. So is he playing great? I would say those numbers say that he's not playing great. And to me, beyond the numbers, what do teams will tell you about your players? They'll tell you which players they're afraid of, which players they want to attack. And they'll go at them early. Who did the Seahawks immediately go after last week on that short DK Metcalf little crossing passing against the zone. They made sure they could have hit DK in two different windows, but they hit him in the window next to Campbell, and he ran right by Campbell. Who did Kyler Murray run right by on that touchdown, the 50-yard touchdown the week prior? Campbell. So I don't know. I mean, to me, Campbell's lateral agility is shot, and I realize Winters is small. He's going to miss some tackles. Graham's inexperienced. He's going to take some poor run fits. You're going to give up some big plays. But those guys are so much faster and so much better at breaking down in space against athletes that, to me, I'm going to be really, really critical of the 49ers if they go to Jalen Graham in like week 10 and he has like a 15 tackle game. You know what I'm saying? It's like you could have played that guy earlier. Last year it was Jameson instead of Oliver, and then you then you cut Jameson. You didn't have him. You went with Oliver until Oliver just was so bad that you had to go to Ambry. As soon as you went to Ambry in the Jacksonville game, stuff flipped. Coverage got tighter, better against the run, better against the pass, better. Same thing's going to happen here. As soon as you take Campbell off the field for Winters or Graham or somebody you trade for or acquire, you're going to see the difference, and everybody's going to be like, why didn't you do that sooner? So I just wish they would get on with it a little bit. I've seen Campbell. I've seen enough. What are you seeing with Campbell? Am I unfairly being critical of Campbell?
No, not at all. And I thought your son, Kev Krueger, who puts out just some phenomenal Niners data on X, outlined it perfectly, and you just read some of the numbers of how bad that he has been. And this is a case where the numbers are not lying to us, and our eyes are not lying to us either. Devondre Campbell has been a liability on the defensive side of the ball for San Francisco. This is really where the Niners have missed Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw was an enforcer. He played with speed and physicality. He played with so much instincts as well. And when you pair that alongside Fred Warner, who has all of those qualities and more, that's why the Niners, when Dre Greenlaw started to find his groove a couple of years ago, especially after Azeez Al-Shire went elsewhere, had one of the top linebacking duos in the NFL. This is also why the Niners, once Dre Greenlaw went out in the Super Bowl with that unfortunate torn Achilles, their defense never recovered. Oren Burks was on the field after Greenlaw. He got targeted 9 times, gave up 9 catches, and Patrick Mahomes pretty much had a perfect passer rating when targeting him. And I'm concerned about this because Andy Reid is one of the top offensive minds in the history of football. We obviously know that already. Coming off the bye, though, including the regular season and in the playoffs, he is 31-7 all time. And during that bye week, he's not going to Mexico. He's not going on vacation. Andy Reid is in the lab. He's studying tape, and he's trying to figure out the flaws and the weaknesses of the San Francisco 49ers. And you just mentioned it. What have the other teams done? They have found that Devondre Campbell in pass coverage is a liability, and he is the weak link on that Niners defense. So Andy Reid is going to try to exploit Devondre Campbell as much as possible. And I know that Jalen Graham and D. Winters, they're younger players. Tatum Bethune, obviously a rookie, and they're going to be out of position sometimes because sometimes they can be overly aggressive. The game is moving a little bit too fast given their inexperience, and they can take themselves out of a play. And the Niners side with these veterans, and a lot of teams do this because they're in these Super Bowl windows, and then they know they can trust some of these vets. But look, we've seen the Niners start to turn the page a little bit, going with some younger players. Renardo Green, Malik Mustafa, Isaac Garendo, Dominic Pooney, all were key cogs in that Seattle win. Now is the time to flip the page. And for Sorensen, stop trying to defend a veteran for the sake of defending a veteran. He's had a great career. He was an All-Pro back in 2021. But all of the metrics, all of the tape shows us that he's been bad. And where did Mahomes have success? Back in February at Allegiant Stadium in the Super Bowl, targeting the middle area of the field. According to Pro Football Focus, he was 24-26 for 256 yards, 9.8 yards per attempt, throwing in between the numbers. That accounted for 77% of his total yardage in that game. And a lot of it came after Dre Greenlaw was out.
No, there's no question. I mean, that was the big monumental shift in that game was when Greenlaw went out. Now this year, fast forward to this year, the Niners don't have Greenlaw, and they've really struggled to defend receivers as far as yards after the catch. They've given up 724 yak yards, sixth most in the league. They gave up a season high 171 yak last week to Seattle, and they've allowed at least 100 yards of yak in 5 of their games this season. Why do you think the Niners are struggling to make tackles? I mean, they've missed 42 tackles in 3 weeks. I mean, that right there when I saw that, I'm like, okay, if I'm Nick Sorensen, Brandon Staley, Kyle Shanahan, it is time to shake it up on defense. Now, you did a little bit of it with Renardo Green. You know, your front is your front. Everybody's going to play. Campbell is the one guy that you could switch out that it might change your fortunes. I think he's I hate to point to that guy, but you know what? There it is, right there. I mean, to me, a lot of those yards after the catch, I mean, DK was a classic example. That was nothing more than a shallow cross against a zone coverage, and Campbell's lack of lateral agility and explosiveness, he was in full trail mode the entire play.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And Andy Reid is such a great play designer where even though the Chiefs over the last couple of years, really since getting rid of Tyreek Hill, have had a mediocre receiver core, Andy Reid does such a good job of designing plays that frees up his wide receivers. Like last year, Kansas City was number 1 in receiver target separation. They didn't have a marquee wide receiver at that position, but that's because Andy Reid does such a good job with pre-snap motion, causing confusion for the defense, putting together a play design that can maximize and attack the weakness of whatever the defense will show on that any given play. And obviously, Patrick Mahomes does such a good job of throwing the ball on time accurately. He has precision with his throws. And then when things break down and you think that you have it defended, what makes Patrick Mahomes so difficult and maddening to defend is that, like Brock Purdy, he has this creativity with his feet and his legs where he can create improvisationally out of structure, and you can have everything bottled up and defended well, and then he'll just break your back with some type of back-breaking play that he can make out of structure. So that is a huge matchup in this game. And Andy Reid going up against Nick Sorensen is a matchup that certainly favors Kansas City.
It sounds like the Niners will be going with Anders Carlson, by the way. It's not Anders, Anders.
Anders.
And it sounds like he's probably going to wind up being the kicker. They'll elevate him from the practice squad. They picked up Carlson this week. There was also an NFL rumors report yesterday that the 49ers may have interest in a trade for Panthers running back Miles Sanders for running back depth. I just think there's better options all over the place than Miles Sanders. But you're familiar with Miles Sanders quite a bit, I'm sure, from his days in Philly. He hasn't necessarily played very much in Carolina. I think last game he had like 3 carries for 1 yard. What do you make of Miles Sanders? He's not old. He's 27. It's not like he's 34 years old and he's long in the tooth. Why has Sanders' career been on the downtick?
Yeah, it's been a crazy downfall for him. Like when he was in Philadelphia, he was a 2nd-round pick out of Penn State. He was behind Saquon Barkley at Penn State for a little while there. And so a lot of people didn't realize how good he was, but he comes to the Eagles in year 1, had more than 800 rushing yards, year 2, more than 800 rushing yards, year 3, more than 700. And then during that Super Bowl run back in 2022, he had a career year. He had almost 1,300 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns and averaged 4.9 yards per carry. He was always a player in Philadelphia who was a little bit frustrating to watch because he would get happy feet in the backfield. And in Kyle Shanahan's offense, that doesn't work. He wants you to see hole, hit hole in that outside zone scheme. You have to be very decisive with getting positive yards. You can't be like LaShawn McCoy where you're dancing in the backfield. At times, Miles Sanders would do that a little bit. He'd fumble the football away. But what's terrific during that 2022 season, and then he signs in Carolina. I think he got like $8 million per year. Last year, the Panthers' offensive line was atrocious, one of the worst in the NFL. And this year, he's been a backup to Chuba Hubbard. And then they drafted Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. And so Miles Sanders has quickly fallen out of favor. I don't think that he's a good scheme fit for what Kyle Shanahan wants to do. If the Niners were to trade for a running back, I think what they do is they go after a familiar face, and either Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson. I think that makes the most sense. But John Lynch said on Friday morning on KNBR that Christian McCaffrey is progressing great, and he's doing awesome in his rehab, coming off Achilles tendonitis in both Achilles, and San Francisco could be opening up his practice window over the next week or two. So that's a good sign. And if Isaac Guerendo goes out there and he pops against Kansas City, I was impressed with what Patrick Taylor did. Jordan Mason is second in the NFL in rushing yards. Does it get to a point where you don't even need to make a move for a running back?
It's a good point. I mean, they do have a lot of options. There are a lot of backs out there too. I mean, there's rookie backs on practice squads. There's free agent backs. Leonard Fournette's available. There's trade possibilities. There's all kinds of. Cleveland's got Pierre Strong. I think he's intriguing, very fast. Deontay Foreman's in Cleveland. He's very fast. There's the Bears have a can full of backs. They might be willing to move like a Velus Jones Jr. if you want a return guy, receiving, running back, third down, whatever. You could go for a speedster like Velus, who's got a lot of talent. So there's a bunch of different kinds of backs, big backs, small backs, young backs, old backs. You know what I mean? There's a lot out there. There's a lot of running backs for sure. I like the Mostert idea, but it's interesting. Forster yesterday mentioned Mostert when he was talking about Guerendo, and he just talked about how the gait of Guerendo, people just don't expect him to be as fast as he is, so they take bad angles. And that they took bad angles with Mostert. And that, I can definitely see the comparison. Mostert's a little leaner. Guerendo's a little bulkier. But Niners ran successfully against 8-man boxes this week. And on that 76-yard run, Pooney had a beautiful block and just knocked the guy out of the hole and then pushed the next guy down. And he just Guerendo ran off his hip and was gone. And I asked Forster about it. He's like, yeah, the safety took a bad angle. What do you think about Guerendo? There's two things that I really was impressed by. One, when you put the ball on the carpet by running into your own guy like he did when he ran up on Sauerbert in the kickoff thing, everybody sees it, and then everybody starts going for the football. So guys were really punching at the ball, guys were really ripping at the ball, and he had just that thing locked up. And to me, it was impressive that he had the peace of mind, or had the he understood what was going on. He understood they're going to come after the ball, and he was prepared for it. So holding on to the football is one, because, that's huge. You cannot fumble in the NFL. You fumble in the NFL, you sit. And so that's key. But then the other thing was that this guy, if you can get him to that second level, people are going to take the wrong angle consistently because of his body shape and their lack of knowledge about what he is as a player. I think he's got several long runs in him, Chase, before people kind of figure out that this is a low 4.3 guy.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's so impressive that he is that fast at that size. And I know that you and I have talked about this a lot, but for the sake of people who don't watch every single show that we do, I've always pointed to Guerendo's athleticism. Like in the pre-draft process, when I was at the NFL Combine, I saw him run his 40, and it just looked different. And it looked different because he's 6 feet, 221 pounds, and he clocked a 4.33 40-yard dash. So when you see a guy who's that size, who runs that fast, and you see it in person, immediately I looked over at the Jumbotron at Lucas Oil Stadium, and I said, who is that guy? Oh, that's Isaac Guerendo, whose path is fascinating because he started his career at Wisconsin, and because of his size and speed, some people were like, oh, he reminds me a little bit of Jonathan Taylor, but then he's hidden on the depth chart there. So he goes to Louisville, and throughout his college career, he's suffering from all of these hamstring issues. He doesn't get his first college start until the bowl game last year, his final college game at Louisville. So going into the draft, he was a little bit unknown, but he was an excellent sprinter as a track and field star in high school. And that speed has always been something that has piqued people's interest. Again, especially at that size. He had a 41.5-inch vertical. He had a 10-inch broad jump. And these relative athletic scores from MathBomb, they judge these athletes during the combine on a scale of 0 to 10. 0, you're an awful athlete. 10, you're superb. He earned a 999 grade. But because of his inexperience, That's why sometimes you see him maybe not hitting the hole or taking a bad angle or missing in pass protection. And his numbers this year are interesting. Like, he had that 90-plus yard kickoff return against the Raiders. That was one of the moments when a lot of casual fans who weren't familiar with him, they're like, the Niners traded up in the 4th round for that guy, right? Yeah. Oh, wow. That's why, because he has that speed. He had that 76-yard carry against Seattle. His other 21 rushing attempts have gone for just 64 yards. So he has great raw speed and acceleration, but he's not experienced enough to be that impact back on every single down. But you keep him in the game because as the game slows down, as he gets more experience, you see some of that talent and potential, and then he's capable of popping a long runoff like he did against the Seahawks. So for the sake of his development, I want to continue to see him get reps. And while Christian McCaffrey is out, this is an opportunity for him to do that. And Jordan Mason, the shoulder injury is always a concern for a running back, but if he can play, great. If you need to limit his carries, that's fine. You have Deebo Samuel. You have Isaac Orendo. Honestly, I was pretty impressed with Patrick Taylor and how he ran against Seattle. He's like a 6'2" back. And so the Niners have all these different backs of all these different makeups. They're not missing Elijah Mitchell at all. So I don't think they need to trade for a back. I'd rather just see Garendo continue to develop, but you're going to have to deal and live with some of the growing pains. And I thought it was funny how Bobby Turner, they talked about this during the Thursday Night Football broadcast. He said that Garendo is an eyelash slower than Raheem Mostert. And so they're very similar players, but according to Taylor, Bobby Turner, an eyelash slower than Raheem Mostert.
And Raheem Mostert was about 215, maybe. This guy's about 10 pounds heavier,
Exactly.
But it's funny though. People did take bad angles on Raheem, but you know what? They're going to take really bad angles on this kid because he looks very thick. He looks like a fullback, and so you don't expect a fullback to run 4.33. He's got several big runs, I think, before the league adjusts.
Hard to bring down in the open field for that reason too.